The desert sky burned with a fiery streak as something tore through the atmosphere, leaving a glowing trail behind. The sound of the impact shook the ground, sending a cloud of dust and smoke into the night air. From his small workshop on the colony's outskirts, Daniel Carter, a human engineer, looked up from his work. His trained eyes recognized the signs. It was a ship crash. Daniel hesitated for a moment. Most people would report it to the authorities, but curiosity got the better of him. If it was an old satellite or a wrecked drone, there might be useful scrap. If it was something more, well, he'd find out soon enough. Grabbing a flashlight and his tool bag, Daniel hopped onto his old all-terrain bike and sped across the wastelands. The cool night air rushed past him as he followed the glowing trail of smoke toward the crash site. When he arrived, he found a half-buried spacecraft, small, sleek, and unlike anything he had seen before. It wasn't human-made. The metal still sizzled with heat, and blue sparks flickered from the damaged panels. Whatever the ship was, it was alien. A faint noise made him freeze. A figure emerged from the smoke, stumbling slightly but standing tall. A woman. No, an alien girl. Her silver-blue skin shimmered under the moonlight, and glowing markings ran along her arms and neck like veins of energy. Her long, dark hair was tangled, and her eyes, a striking violet color, locked onto him with a sharp, calculating gaze. She wore a form-fitting suit, now torn in places, revealing a few minor injuries. She had no weapons in hand, but her tense posture told Daniel she was ready to fight if needed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she took a shaky breath and said something in a language he didn't understand. Daniel raised his hands, showing he wasn't a threat. "Hey, I don't understand you, but I'm not here to hurt you," he said slowly. The alien girl narrowed her eyes. Then, to his surprise, she spoke again, this time in broken English. "You, human?" she asked, her voice carrying an unfamiliar accent. "Yeah," Daniel nodded. "And you?" She hesitated. "Lyra." Daniel glanced at her ship. "You crashed pretty hard. Are you hurt?" Lyra frowned, then looked down at herself as if checking. "No. Minor." "Your ship doesn't look so lucky." Daniel took a step toward the wreck, but she immediately raised a hand, her fingers glowing faintly with energy. "Stay. No touch." Daniel held up his hands again. All right. Just saying, it's in bad shape." He motioned toward the sparking engine, where the metal was bent and torn. "You're not going anywhere unless that gets fixed." Lyra exhaled sharply. She knew that already. Slowly, the glow in her hand faded, and she lowered her guard slightly. Daniel studied her expression. She looked frustrated, maybe even desperate. He had seen that look before in stranded travelers who needed help but didn't want to admit it. "Look," he said, keeping his voice calm. "I'm a mechanic. I fix things. If you want, I can help you." Lyra didn't answer right away. She studied him carefully, as if trying to decide whether he was lying. Finally, she spoke. "You help?" Daniel nodded. "Yeah, I have a workshop not far from here. We can take what's left of your ship and see what we can do." Lyra hesitated again, then muttered something under her breath in her own language. After a moment, she gave a small nod. "Okay, but no tricks, human." Daniel smirked. "I don't do tricks. I do repairs." Together, they started assessing the damage. Daniel noted that some parts were completely fried, while others were salvageable. It would take time, effort, and a lot of improvisation to get the ship working again. As he worked, he stole occasional glances at Lyra. She was cautious, constantly watching him. He could tell she didn't trust humans, but for now, she had no other choice. The night stretched on as Daniel gathered tools and spare parts from his bike. Lyra, despite her injuries, insisted on helping. Though she struggled with some human tools, her intelligence and precision were impressive. As they worked side by side under the starry sky, An unspoken question lingered in Daniel's mind. Who was she running from? And more importantly, how much time did they have before whoever was chasing her arrived? The cold desert wind blew across the wreckage as Daniel wiped sweat from his brow. The ship's outer hull was dented, and some of the internal circuits were completely fried. Fixing it wouldn't be easy. Liara crouched nearby, watching him closely. She still didn't trust him, but she also had no choice. Her ship was useless without human help. Daniel stood up and dusted off his hands. All right, I've checked the damage. The good news is, I can fix some parts. Liara tilted her head. Bad news. He sighed. I don't have everything we need. Your ship has alien tech I've never seen before. Some parts are completely destroyed. I'll need replacements. Liara crossed her arms. Where? Daniel smirked. Well, that's the problem. We don't exactly have a store for alien ship parts. Liara frowned. Then, no fix. Daniel shook his head. No, I can still fix it. But we need to be creative. I can modify human technology to replace the missing parts. It won't be perfect, but it'll get your ship running. Liara narrowed her eyes. Human parts. Work. Daniel grinned. If I do it right, yeah. I just need to get a few things from my workshop. Liara hesitated. Leaving her ship behind wasn't something she wanted to do. Her people had warned her about humans. Dangerous, selfish creatures who would betray her the first chance they got. But Daniel had done nothing but offer help. Fine, she said. I come. Daniel raised an eyebrow. To my workshop. She nodded. I not leave ship, but I not leave you too. Daniel chuckled. Fair enough. Let's go. The ride to the workshop. Daniel led Liara to his all-terrain bike. She looked at it with suspicion. This? Safe. Daniel smirked. Safer than walking through the desert. Liara hesitated before climbing on behind him. The moment Daniel started the engine, she flinched at the roar of the motor. Relax, Daniel said. Hold on. Liara was about to protest, but when the bike lurched forward, she instinctively grabbed onto his waist. The wind rushed past them as they sped across the wastelands, the wreckage of her ship fading into the distance. She had never traveled this way before. So fast, so exposed. It felt strangely thrilling. Daniel felt her grip tighten and chuckled. Not bad, huh? Liara scowled. This, dangerous. He laughed. Everything worth doing is a little dangerous. After a few minutes, the outline of Daniel's workshop appeared in the distance. It was a small, metal structure built with salvaged parts and old machinery. When they arrived, Daniel parked the bike and hopped off. Liara hesitated before stepping onto the sand, her violet eyes scanning the area for threats. No one else here? She asked. Nope, Daniel said, unlocking the door. Just me. Liara followed him inside, her gaze flicking between stacks of tools, half-built machines, and glowing panels covered in strange human symbols. She was impressed, though she wouldn't admit it. Daniel turned on the lights. Welcome to my humble workshop. Liara walked around slowly, touching a few pieces of equipment. You build all this? Daniel shrugged. Yeah, fixing things is what I do. She nodded slightly. Maybe this human was more useful than she thought. Finding the right parts. Daniel grabbed a few tools and motioned for Liara to join him at his workbench. All right, so your ship's power converter is fried. I need to replace it with something from my collection. Liara watched as he dug through a box of old parts, occasionally pulling something out and muttering to himself. She frowned. You sure? Human parts work. Daniel smirked. We'll make them work. After searching for a few minutes, he pulled out a large metallic device with wires sticking out. This, he said, holding it up. It's an old fusion generator. If I modify it, it should work as a power converter. Liara studied it carefully. The design was primitive compared to her people's technology, but the structure was solid. You sure? She asked again. Daniel grinned. Trust me, I fixed worse. She exhaled. Then, we fix. Daniel nodded. We fix. An unexpected visitor. As they began working, Daniel suddenly heard a distant noise outside. He froze, listening. Liara noticed his reaction. What? Someone's here, he whispered. He quickly moved to the workshop window, peering outside. His stomach tightened when he saw a dusty black vehicle approaching. Dan, he muttered. Liara moved beside him. Who? Daniel sighed. Trouble. Liara stiffened. Human. Yeah. His name's Rogan. A local scavenger. Not a good guy. Liara narrowed her eyes. Dangerous. Daniel nodded. Very. The vehicle came to a stop outside, and the workshop door rattled as someone knocked loudly. Daniel. A rough voice called. I know you're in there. Open up. Daniel cursed under his breath. Liara stepped back, her markings glowing faintly as she prepared for a fight. Stay out of sight, Daniel whispered. Let me handle this. Liara hesitated, but then nodded, slipping behind a pile of equipment. Daniel took a deep breath, then opened the door. Rogan stood there, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek and dark, beady eyes. He smirked. Well, Rogan said. Been a while. Daniel forced a smile. Rogan, what brings you here? Rogan glanced inside. Heard a ship crashed nearby. Thought you might have found something interesting. Daniel's heart pounded. Rogan was a pirate, a smuggler, and a thief. If he suspected anything about Liara, things could turn ugly. Daniel leaned against the doorframe. Haven't seen anything. Just been working. Rogan smirked. That's so. His eyes flicked around the workshop, lingering on Liara's discarded glove on a nearby table. Daniel's stomach dropped. Rogan's smirk widened. You sure about that? Daniel's heartbeat quickened as Rogan's sharp eyes lingered on the alien glove. The scavenger was no fool. He had survived in the wastelands by being ruthless and suspicious. Just some junk I picked up, Daniel said casually, stepping slightly to block Rogan's view. Nothing special. Rogan's smirk didn't fade. He tapped his fingers against his belt, where a rusty but dangerous pistol hung. Junk, huh? He said. Funny thing. Locals saw something crash out here last night. Now, I find you acting all nervous. Daniel forced a laugh. I always act nervous around guys who show up uninvited. Rogan chuckled but didn't move. I think I'll take a look around. Daniel clenched his jaw. If Rogan saw Liara, things would turn ugly fast. He needed to keep him away. Sheesh, fine, Daniel said, stepping aside. Look around. Just don't break anything. Rogan raised an eyebrow, not expecting Daniel to let him in so easily. But he didn't trust him either. He took slow steps inside, scanning the workshop with sharp, calculating eyes. Daniel casually leaned against a table, keeping his body between Rogan and Liara's hiding spot. So, Rogan muttered as he picked up a broken engine part. Find anything good recently? Not much, Daniel said. Business has been slow. Rogan scoffed. Yeah. Then how do you afford to live out here? Daniel shrugged. I get by. Rogan's gaze flickered to a metallic panel on a nearby workbench, glowing faintly with alien markings. Daniel cursed in his mind. He had forgotten to hide that. Rogan reached for it. Now this looks interesting. Before he could grab it, Daniel knocked over a box of scrap metal, sending a loud clatter across the workshop. Rogan turned sharply, instinctively reaching for his pistol. Daniel raised his hands in mock innocence. Oops. Rogan narrowed his eyes. He knew a distraction when he saw one. Something wasn't right. He slowly turned back toward the workbench. And then suddenly, a loud crash came from the back of the workshop. Both men froze. Rogan's expression darkened. What was that? Daniel's mind raced. Liara must have shifted or knocked something over. Odd, Daniel stammered. Probably just the wind. Rogan's hand gripped his pistol. Wind doesn't sound like that. He started walking toward the back of the workshop. Daniel had to stop him. Now. Lyara's move. From behind the equipment, Lyra watched with narrowed eyes. Her alien instincts told her that this human, Rogan, was a predator and she was the prey. She had two choices: stay hidden and risk being discovered, or strike first. She chose the second. Just as Rogan reached her hiding spot, Lyra lunged forward, her speed faster than any human's reaction time. Before Rogan could turn fully, Lyra grabbed his wrist and twisted it sharply, forcing his pistol to the ground. Rogan yelled in shock. What the? Lyra kicked his legs out, making him stumble backward. She didn't want to kill him, but she needed to end this quickly. Daniel jumped forward and snatched Rogan's pistol before he could grab it. All right, Daniel said, aiming the gun at Rogan's chest. Let's calm down. Rogan gritted his teeth, staring up at Lyra. His expression shifted from shock to realization. His eyes flicked between her violet skin, glowing markings and strange clothing. Well, Rogan muttered. Now I see why you were acting so nervous. Daniel sighed. The secret was out. Rogan chuckled darkly. An alien? Out here. Damn, Daniel, you just found the biggest payday in history. Daniel's grip on the pistol tightened. I'm not selling her, Rogan. Rogan smirked. Oh, I don't think you have a choice. A dangerous deal. Lyra stood over Rogan, her glowing eyes locked onto him. She didn't understand everything he said, but she knew greed when she saw it. Daniel knew what Rogan was thinking. If he left, he'd tell others. And if others knew, Lyra would never be safe. Daniel exhaled. We can make a deal. Rogan raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Daniel lowered the pistol slightly but kept a firm hold. You forget you saw her, and in return, I give you half of my best salvage. Rogan scoffed. Half? You think I'd walk away for half? Daniel stared at him. Then how about I don't shoot you, and you walk away with your life? Rogan chuckled coldly, but there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. Daniel pressed further. You know me, Rogan. I don't pick fights, but I don't lose them either. Rogan exhaled sharply. Fine. He raised his hands in surrender. I'll keep my mouth shut. Lyra still didn't trust him. You lie, she said firmly. Rogan smirked. She talks. Cute. Daniel stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. If I find out you told anyone, I'll make sure you regret it. Rogan grinned, but didn't argue. Relax. I know when to cut my losses. Daniel hesitated, then finally lowered the gun. Get out, he said. Rogan stood up, brushing dust off his jacket. Pleasure doing business, Daniel. With one last look at Lyra, he turned and walked out. Daniel and Lyra waited, listening as Rogan's vehicle started up and drove away into the distance. Only when the sound disappeared did Daniel let out a deep breath. That was close, he muttered. Lyra frowned. He come back. Daniel rubbed his temples. Maybe. We need to hurry and fix your ship before he changes his mind. Lyra nodded. Then we work fast. Daniel picked up the tools and glanced at her. Let's get started. But deep down, he knew this wasn't over. Daniel worked fast, his hands moving with practiced ease as he connected wires and adjusted circuits. Lyra sat beside him, her violet skin glowing faintly under the dim light of the workshop. Her fingers were just as skilled, carefully aligning pieces of alien technology with human tools. Outside, the wind howled, kicking up dust against the metal walls of the workshop. But that wasn't what worried Daniel. Rogan knew about Lyra now. That meant trouble was coming. It was just a matter of when. We need to finish this before he returns, Daniel muttered, tightening a bolt. Lyra nodded. I work fast. She picked up a small silver device from her damaged ship's core and studied it. This controls flight power. It's broken. Needs new energy source. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead. Can we replace it with something from here? Lyra's glowing eyes scanned the workshop. Maybe. She walked over to a shelf, picking up a large battery pack from an old generator. This could work. Daniel frowned. Are you sure? Human power sources are different from your technology. Lyra gave him a confident look. I can make it work. She quickly set the battery onto the table and pulled out a thin, glowing tool from her belt. With careful hands, she began modifying the energy connections, making adjustments that Daniel barely understood. Daniel watched in fascination. She was brilliant. Faster than any human engineer he had ever met. He let out a small chuckle. You really know what you're doing. Lyra smirked. You're not bad either, human. For a moment, despite the danger, Daniel felt a strange warmth inside him. They worked well together. But that moment didn't last. A loud crash echoed from outside. Daniel and Lyra froze. Unwanted visitors. Daniel quickly killed the workshop lights and moved to the window. Peeking through the metal slats, his heart dropped. A black off-road truck had stopped just outside. 5 men jumped out, all armed. Rogan was one of them. Daniel clenched his fists. So much for keeping his mouth shut. Lyra moved beside him, her voice barely a whisper. They come for me. Daniel nodded. Yeah. And they won't leave without you. He scanned the workshop. They were outnumbered and outgunned. His old pistol lay on the table, but against 5 men with rifles, it wouldn't do much. Lyra touched his arm. We run. Daniel shook his head. They'd see us. We need to be smart. A voice boomed from outside. Daniel. Rogan shouted. Come on out. Let's talk. Daniel exhaled sharply. I hate that guy. He turned to Lyra. Hide. Now. Lyra hesitated but then nodded, slipping behind a half-repaired ship. Daniel grabbed his pistol and stepped outside, keeping his expression calm. Rogan smirked, standing in front of his men. I figured you'd try something stupid like hiding. Daniel crossed his arms. What do you want, Rogan? Rogan laughed. Come on, you already know. Hand over the alien girl, and I'll make sure you don't get hurt. Daniel scoffed. That's funny, because last time I checked, I wasn't scared of you. Rogan's smirk faltered. He turned to one of his men. Search the place. Before they could move, Daniel raised his pistol and fired a warning shot into the ground. The men stopped, startled. Next one goes in your leg, Daniel said coldly. Rogan's eyes darkened. You think you can take us all? Daniel smiled, though his heart pounded. Maybe, or maybe you don't want to find out. Rogan hesitated. He knew Daniel wasn't bluffing. The man had been a scrapper for years, and anyone who survived this long in the wastelands wasn't weak. But then, Rogan smirked again. Fine, he said, if that's how you want to play it. Then he raised a hand, signaling his men. A fight begins. One of Rogan's men suddenly pulled out a flash grenade and threw it toward the workshop. Daniel's eyes widened. Cover. Boom. A blinding light exploded, forcing Daniel to stumble back. His vision blurred, and his ears rang. Through the haze, he saw Rogan's men rushing toward the workshop. He gritted his teeth. No, they can't take her. He barely recovered before 2 men grabbed him, forcing him to the ground. Daniel struggled but couldn't break free. One of them aimed a rifle at his head. Then, a sudden blur of violet shot across his vision. Lyra. She moved like lightning, leaping onto one of the men and slamming him into the ground with incredible strength. The second man turned his rifle toward her, but Daniel elbowed him hard, knocking the gun away. He grabbed the man's arm and twisted, sending him crashing into the dirt. Lyra kicked another man so hard he flew backward, smashing into Rogan's truck. Rogan cursed and raised his own gun. But before he could fire, Lyra threw a metal rod. knocking the weapon from his hands. Rogan stumbled back, eyes wide. What the hell is she? Daniel stood beside Lyra, breathing heavily. Told you, Rogan, you should have walked away. Rogan glared at them, then at his fallen men. He had lost this fight. With a furious growl, he spat onto the ground. This isn't over, Daniel. Then he turned and climbed into his truck. His men groaned, dragging themselves after him. A moment later, the truck roared to life and sped off into the night. A moment of silence. Daniel let out a long breath, his body still tense. Lyra glanced at him. You okay? Daniel chuckled. You're the one who did most of the fighting. Lyra smirked. You helped. Daniel rubbed his sore arms. Yeah, let's go with that. They turned to the half-repaired ship, still sitting in the workshop. Lyra's expression grew serious. They come back. More people. Daniel sighed. She was right. Rogan wouldn't give up that easily. Next time, he'd come back with more men, more weapons. We need to finish your ship, Daniel said firmly. Lyra nodded. Then we work all night. Daniel looked at her, admiring her determination. He had never met anyone like her. As they stepped back inside, Daniel made a silent promise. No matter what, he wouldn't let anything happen to her. Daniel and Lyra worked through the night, their hands moving quickly over the ship's damaged systems. Every second mattered. Rogan would return, and this time, he wouldn't come alone. The small workshop was filled with the hum of machines, the flickering light of torches, and the occasional spark of metal against metal. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead as he secured the last energy cable. Try it now, he said. Lyra pressed a glowing button on the ship's control panel. A low hum filled the air. The engine flickered, then powered down again. Still not enough energy, Lyra muttered, frustration clear in her voice. Daniel sighed. We need a stronger power source. Lyra tapped her fingers against the panel, deep in thought. We use workshop generator. Daniel shook his head. Not powerful enough. But he hesitated. There is something else. A dangerous idea. Daniel walked over to a locked metal cabinet at the back of the workshop. He opened it carefully, revealing a large rectangular battery with thick cables attached. It was old but still dangerous, a military-grade power cell from a long-forgotten war. Lyra's eyes widened. That could work. Daniel pulled it out, carefully placing it on the table. Yeah, but if we mess up the connection, the whole place might explode. Lyra grinned. Then we don't mess up. Daniel chuckled. Easy for you to say. With extreme caution, they worked together to attach the power cell to the ship's main energy core. Every move had to be perfect. One wrong wire, and everything would be destroyed. Sweat dripped down Daniel's face as he connected the final wire. Okay, moment of truth. Lyra took a deep breath and pressed the activation switch. The ship rumbled. The lights flickered. Then, with a sudden roar, the engine came to life. A deep, powerful hum vibrated through the workshop. It works, Lyra said, excitement in her voice. Daniel let out a breath of relief. Yeah, but we're not done yet. We still need to test the controls and... A loud explosion cut him off. Rogan returns. The front door of the workshop burst open, and Daniel barely had time to react before a group of armed men rushed inside. Rogan stood at the entrance, a cruel smirk on his face. This time, he had brought 10 men. Daniel instinctively moved in front of Lyra, gripping his pistol tightly. You just don't know when to quit, do you? Rogan laughed. I told you, Daniel, this isn't over. You had your chance to hand over the alien. Now, I take what I want. His men raised their weapons. Lyra's fingers twitched toward her belt, where her small energy blade rested. Daniel's mind raced. Fighting wasn't an option, not against this many men. But then he noticed something. The ship's control panel was still active. A plan formed in his mind. A crazy, dangerous plan. He glanced at Lyra. "Can you fly the ship?" She understood immediately. "Yes." Daniel turned back to Rogan, keeping his voice calm. "You know, Rogan, you made one mistake." Rogan raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and what's that?" Daniel smirked. "You walked into my workshop. Escape plan." Before Rogan could react, Daniel grabbed a metal wrench from the table and hurled it at the nearest enemy. The man stumbled back, his gun firing wildly into the air. Lyra leaped into action, activating her energy blade and slicing through a rifle before its owner could aim. Daniel dived for cover, rolling behind a metal crate as bullets tore through the workshop. "Lyra, go," he shouted. She sprinted toward the ship, dodging enemy fire with inhuman speed. Daniel grabbed a fallen rifle, firing a few shots toward Rogan's men to buy her time. Lyra reached the cockpit, slamming her hands on the controls. The ship roared to life, the engines flaring bright blue. Rogan's eyes widened. "Stop here." But it was too late. With a deafening blast, the ship lifted off the ground, sending debris flying in every direction. Daniel shielded his face as the force of the takeoff knocked Rogan's men to the ground. A desperate leap. The ship began to rise, but Daniel was still on the ground. "Daniel," Lyra called from the open hatch. "Jump." Daniel didn't hesitate. With every ounce of strength, he sprinted forward and leaped toward the rising ship. Lyra reached out, grabbing his arm just in time. She pulled him up, and together, they collapsed onto the floor of the ship as the workshop below disappeared into the distance. Rogan's furious screams faded behind them. A moment of relief. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Then, Daniel started laughing. That was insane. Lyra smiled, breathing heavily. "Yes, but we survived." Daniel sat up, looking out the window. The stars stretched out before them. They had made it. But their journey wasn't over. Lyra turned to him, her glowing eyes filled with determination. "Now, we find a place to land." Daniel nodded, "And we figure out what's next." For the first time, he realized something. He wasn't just helping an alien fix her ship. He was part of something bigger now. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the ship's window, glowing like distant fireflies in the vast darkness. Daniel sat in the co-pilot's seat, his fingers drumming on the armrest as Lyra focused on the controls. Their escape had been a close call, but now they had a new problem. Where to go next? "We can't stay in open space too long," Daniel said. "If Rogan has ships, he'll come after us." Lyra nodded. "I am scanning for planets nearby. We need a place to repair fully." The ship's console beeped, displaying a holographic image of a green and blue planet. "Zifar 3, Lyra read aloud. "Breathable air, not heavily populated. Some old ruins, but no major cities." Daniel leaned forward. "Sounds perfect. How long to get there?" 2 hours at this speed." Daniel sighed in relief. "All right, let's hope it's as peaceful as it sounds." A rough landing. 2 hours later, the ship entered the planet's atmosphere, shaking violently as it descended through thick clouds. Sparks still flickered from the damaged engines, and Lyra gritted her teeth as she struggled to keep control. Daniel gripped the seat. "Are we crashing?" Lyra shot him a sharp look. "No, we are landing. Very fast." The ship lurched forward, speeding toward the surface. A vast jungle stretched below, thick with towering trees and winding rivers. Lyra managed to pull up just in time, skimming over the treetops before bringing the ship down onto a clearing of soft grass and dirt. The impact shook the whole cabin. Daniel let out a long breath. That was smooth. Lyra raised an eyebrow. "You are still alive." "That is smooth." Daniel chuckled, unbuckling his seatbelt. "All right, let's check outside." Exploring the planet. The air outside was warm and fresh, carrying the scent of damp earth and strange flowers. Daniel stepped out cautiously, scanning the jungle. The trees were massive, their leaves glowing faintly in the dim sunlight. "It's quiet," Daniel said. "Too quiet." Liara was already inspecting the ship. "We need to fix the external thrusters before we can fly again." Daniel sighed. "Of course we do." Grabbing his tool bag, he got to work while Liara explored the area, scanning for threats. "Something is watching." An hour passed. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead, adjusting the thruster panel. "Okay, this should." A low growl echoed from the trees. Daniel froze. Slowly, he turned his head toward the jungle. The bushes rustled. Something was moving. "Liara?" he called softly. She was already alert, her energy blade in hand. "I see it." A shadow emerged from the trees, a creature unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. It stood on 4 muscular legs, its body covered in thick, dark fur. Its eyes glowed red, and its sharp teeth gleamed in the dim light. "That does not look friendly," Daniel muttered. The creature let out a deep, guttural snarl. Then, without warning, it attacked. A fight for survival. The beast lunged at Daniel with terrifying speed. He rolled to the side just in time, narrowly avoiding its snapping jaws. Liara dashed forward, slashing with her energy blade. The creature dodged, its reflexes unnaturally fast. Daniel scrambled for his pistol, firing a shot. The bullet hit the beast's thick fur, but barely slowed it down. "This thing is tough," Daniel shouted. Liara moved like a blur, striking at its legs. Her blade cut into its side, and the creature howled in pain before whipping its massive tail toward her. She jumped back, but the force still knocked her off balance. Daniel didn't think, he acted. Grabbing a metal rod from his tool bag, he charged forward and slammed it against the creature's skull. The beast staggered, growling in fury. Liara took the chance. With one swift move, she drove her blade deep into its chest. The creature let out one final snarl before collapsing onto the ground, its glowing eyes fading to darkness. Daniel stood there, breathing hard. Well, that was terrifying. Liara wiped her blade clean. "You are lucky it was alone." Daniel frowned. "You're saying there could be more?" Liara glanced at the jungle. "Maybe. We must be careful. A bigger problem." As they turned back to the ship, Daniel stopped. Something was wrong. Smoke was rising from the control panel on the ship's exterior. Liara's eyes widened. "That is not from the landing." Daniel rushed forward. No, this can't be happening." He opened the panel. The wiring was fried. "Can you fix it?" Liara asked. Daniel gritted his teeth. "I can try, but without the right parts." He looked toward the jungle. "We might have to go looking for supplies." Liara nodded. "Then we move quickly. We do not know what else is out there." Daniel sighed, grabbing his pack. "Great, just what I wanted. A survival mission on an alien planet." Liara smirked. "You will do fine. You are a great engineer." Daniel shook his head. "Let's hope that's enough." As they stepped into the jungle, the trees whispered with unseen movement. And somewhere, in the distance, something else was watching. The jungle was alive with strange sounds, distant howls, rustling leaves, and the occasional hum of unseen creatures. Daniel and Liara moved carefully, their steps light on the damp ground. Their ship was damaged. They needed parts, and they had no idea what else was out there. Daniel adjusted his tool belt. "All right, where do we start looking?" Liara held up her scanner. "There is a metallic signal about 2 miles ahead. It could be wreckage, or something useful." "Let's hope it's not more of those monsters," Daniel muttered. Liara gave him a small smirk. "You fought well last time." "Yeah, I'd rather not do it again." They pushed forward, deeper into the jungle, following the scanner's readings. The ruins. After an hour of walking, they reached a clearing. In front of them stood the remains of an old alien structure, tall stone pillars covered in glowing blue vines. The walls were cracked, and pieces of metal were scattered around. Daniel's eyes widened. This looks ancient. What civilization built this? Lara touched one of the markings on the wall. This is from an old Zephyrian colony. They were here long ago. Daniel knelt and picked up a broken console panel. His fingers ran over the dusty surface. If this is Zephyrian tech, maybe we can salvage something for the ship. Lara scanned the area. Be careful. This place is not abandoned. Daniel froze. What do you mean? She pointed at the ground. Fresh footprints. Someone, or something, was here recently. The encounter. A rustling sound came from the ruins. Daniel's hand went to his pistol. Lara gripped her energy blade. Then, a figure stepped into view. It was a tall alien wrapped in dark armor with piercing yellow eyes. It stared at them, gripping a long energy rifle. Daniel swallowed hard. Friend or enemy? Lara didn't lower her weapon. We do not know yet. The alien studied them before speaking in a deep voice. You are not from this planet. Daniel hesitated. Neither are you. The alien nodded slowly. I am a survivor. My ship crashed here cycles ago. Lara stepped forward. Then we have the same goal. We need parts to fix our ship. The alien's eyes narrowed. And why should I help you? Daniel sighed. Because if we don't work together, none of us are getting off this planet. The alien was silent for a moment. Then with a slow nod, he said, Follow me. The trade. The alien led them into the ruins. Inside, Daniel's eyes widened. Scattered tech, wires, and broken ship parts were stacked in piles. This is incredible, Daniel whispered. The alien crossed his arms. I have collected these over time. Some still work. Some do not. Lara stepped closer. We need a functional power relay. Do you have one? The alien turned and dug through a pile. He pulled out a small metallic device, humming faintly with energy. This, he said, is what you need. Daniel's heart leaped. That's perfect. The alien held it tight. But I do not give for free. Daniel tensed. What do you want? The alien glanced at the entrance. His voice dropped. Protection. You are not the only ones who need to leave this planet. Others are hunting me. Lara exchanged a look with Daniel. Daniel sighed. So, if we help you fight off these hunters, you'll give us the part. The alien nodded. That is the deal. The battle begins. Before Daniel could respond, a loud roar filled the air. The alien spun around, gripping his rifle. They found me. Daniel's stomach dropped as asterisk figures emerged from the jungle. Asterisk, large reptilian creatures, wearing scavenged armor and wielding sharp weapons. Let's talk later, Daniel muttered. Right now, we fight. The first attacker lunged at Lara. She dodged and slashed with her energy blade, cutting through its armor. Daniel fired his pistol, hitting another in the chest. The alien warrior beside him unleashed a plasma blast, sending an enemy flying backward. But more kept coming. We're outnumbered, Daniel shouted. Lara gritted her teeth. Then we finish this fast. She charged forward, dodging a spear and slicing through two enemies in one swift move. Daniel ducked as an attacker swung at him. He grabbed a metal rod from the ground and smashed it into the creature's head. The alien warrior fired a final shot, hitting the last enemy square in the chest. Silence followed. The battle was over. The final choice. Daniel caught his breath. Please tell me that's all of them. The alien warrior scanned the area. For now. Lara turned to him. You owe us the part. The alien nodded and handed over the power relay. Daniel held it carefully. Thank you. Are you coming with us? The alien looked at the ruins. This has been my home for many years, but it is time to leave. Daniel gave him a small smile. Then let's get out of here. The escape. Back at the ship, Daniel installed the power relay while Lara and the alien warrior guarded the perimeter. As soon as the final wire was connected, the ship hummed to life. Daniel grinned. "We're back in business." Liara smiled. "Then let's go home." The alien warrior stepped inside. "I do not know where I belong anymore." Daniel patted his shoulder. "Stick with us. The galaxy is a big place. We'll find somewhere." Liara started the engines. The ship rose from the ground, breaking through the planet's atmosphere. As they soared into the stars, Daniel leaned back in his seat, watching the jungle disappear below. They had come to this planet as survivors. Now, they were something more, and their adventure was just beginning.